Questions and Answers with Sally Baker from Family Connection, South Carolina. What did Family Connection of South Carolina do, and who did it reach when training with the Supporting Your Child's Literacy Development at Home tutorial and facilitator's guide provided by NCIL?
So my CEO here at Family Connection and our director of training at the time got the information, talked with Sarah, made a plan, and brought it to me as one of our staff members who has a background in literacy and special education, and really talked about how can we take this to the families that we serve. How do we support families in learning how to support their children? And we do serve families with kids with disabilities. This is not created specifically for a child with a disability, which was great in our opinion, because we want that inclusion and that inclusivity. And so we were able to take this information and kind of tweak it a little bit to work for the families and the professionals that we serve. So like I said, we took this information, we looked at it, I reviewed everything, and we decided to present the material pretty much exactly as is. So what I did the first time is I went to a child development center that is attached to one of our school districts here in South Carolina and presented to a group of parents there. So their children were in school or in preschool. And I delivered the preschool strand. And what I did was, like I said, I took it very much exactly how it was. And so I went, and instead of having the self-paced piece of it, like Sarah mentioned, I played it in the room where I was presenting it. I turned off the narration, and I was the narrator. So I, of course, added in some personal stories and some anecdotes and different tips and tricks and things like that. But we learned from this because I was in a school that did not have a strong Wi-Fi setting, which made streaming some of the videos that are in the training a little difficult. We had some speaker issues, all kinds of things. So we came back from that and we took that information. I came back to Sarah and said, hey, this is great. We ran into some bugs and some glitches. Can we look at how else we could deliver this? And so we kind of turned it into a PowerPoint. And then we took those videos and we actually embedded them into our presentation, into our PowerPoint, so that when I was in places that are more rural, that have more difficulties with Wi-Fi, and again, this was pre-pandemic where everybody had not beefed up their Wi-Fi's and things like that. And that way it was embedded and I didn't have to worry about that and was able to still deliver the content with fidelity, but just took it just a little different spin. So we delivered that a few more times with our new format, and actually then further tweaked it in that I then presented it to professionals and not just to parents. And by tweaking, I did not change any of the content that NCIL had created, but I was able to kind of talk about the focus in a different way when I worked with the professionals. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. You could go to the next slide, Sarah. So just to give you a kind of a snapshot picture of some data points and kind of who we reached, you can see that we did this across 2 fiscal years because we started a little later in our fiscal year 19. And it ran over into our fiscal year 2020 as kind of like our pilot timeframe. And across that year or so, we saw delivered this to almost 300 people in person. So we're really excited about that. I kind of broke down who our demographics were that we worked with. You can see we had a bunch of parents and we had a bunch of professionals, and I'll again talk in a minute about that, how we delivered it to professionals. We reached a lot of the federal disability categories. Several of the families that we served also indicated in their surveys or in their evaluations that they were parents of children who did not have a diagnosis yet, but maybe there was a suspicion or concern about their reading abilities and their development. So we're really excited about the number of people that we were able to reach and kind of the broad spectrum there. The professionals that attended represented people from school district level to classroom level, classroom teachers, reading coaches, family engagement liaisons. So we had kind of a broad spectrum reach there as well to continue this information, providing this information. Next slide. What did they have to say? So we all live in a data-driven world. So we provided those evaluations just like we've always done at our workshops. And so at the end of them, again, these were in person. So we actually had that pencil paper surveys versus having someone go find a link and send it back later. So I feel like we got pretty good return. I was able to see kind of immediately where some of the concerns were, what things we needed to tweak, and where do we go from there. But you can see here that 100% of the participants that completed the survey said that the workshop met their expectations. 98% said the information was clearly stated and discussed, and 99% said the workshop provided information that was useful to their job and or their daily life, which I loved reading some of the feedback, because you could tell even when it was professionals that they found a way to apply this to their personal lives. And I will attest to that as well. I have found different ways to use this at my home. I have a now 6-year-old and almost 3-year-old, and a husband who doesn't have a background in literacy or education. So I've been able to use some of this information. And how do I talk to my husband about further developing our children's literacy skills? So I'll talk some more about that in a second too. All right, next slide. These are just some quotes from some of our attendees. I put the professional responses in green and the parents are in blue. And you guys can read this. You know, they've thought about different ways after doing this, different ways to have these conversations, different reasons why the conversations are important. How do they engage with their children at home? Parents, you know, there's some parts of it that talk about finding a special place for reading with your child. I always use the example when I'm doing this presentation that at one point in life for us, my child was so immersed in love books that like it was at the breakfast table. We did it at the breakfast table. Take a bite, turn the page, take a bite, turn the page. This is how we did our mornings. And so just talking about that kind of personal aspect and how do you do this in real life as a parent? How do you find what works to support my child at home? The last bullet on this page is probably one of my favorite quotes from a family. And it sounds so strange to say that, but in the elementary strand, there's a focus on literacy isn't just inside the covers of a book, right? Literacy is reading the street signs, it's looking at billboards, it's reading the things inside your doctor's offices. And then also it doesn't all have to be fiction. It doesn't have to be that chapter book. And so maybe you want to read some nonfiction and incorporate some magazines into there. We talk about newspapers and now I feel like those are a thing of the past. But there's a lot of magazines that are available for children out there. And so I love that this parent, her wheels were now turning, thinking, oh, I don't just have to go to the library and check out books. Now I can think about maybe we should get a magazine subscription that is exciting and something new every month so that they can get. So I just love hearing these responses from families and how they put them into practice in their real world.
Thanks for watching this Q&A with Sally Baker from Family Connection, South Carolina, about aligning home and school practices using the Supporting Your Child's Literacy Development at Home tutorial and facilitator's guide. You can find out more about supporting your child's literacy development at home in the Implementation Toolkit on the National Center on Improving Literacy's website, improvingliteracy.org. Watch another video in our Question and Answer series with Sally Baker from Family Connection, South Carolina.